Saludos, everyone. This is Albert Campa with another episode of the Pocho podcast, bringing you everything that's Mexican-American, that's Chicano, that's Pocho, that's whatever you want to call a Mexican descendant living in the United States of America, and the culture of Mexico / American, Spanglish, English, whatever you want to call it. This is the Pocho experience, and let's get into it. Recently, UFC had press conference with a future fight that's coming up, a big one actually. Khabib Nurmagomedov is facing Tony Ferguson for the lightweight title. Tony Ferguson, El Cucuy, who has some Mexican roots and props up Mexico, uses the Mexican card, has used the Mexican flag before, and recently in a press conference with Khabib got into it a little bit about what a real Mexican is, and that's exactly what we talk about here on the Pocho podcast, where here in the United States the big deal is what is Mexican. Because really, does a Pocho really know what a Mexican is? To certain extents. Let's check it out. Khabib here is, of course, going on a back and forth with Tony Ferguson, and let's listen to what he has to say.
Of course, he make me mad right now because he lied. He lied. He's not Mexican.
You owe me 200K. Shut up.
He's fake Mexican. This one is true. Say true.
I'm American, and I'm Mexican, and I'm proud.
Okay, so he pretty much, that's the disrespect of it all right there. A Russian is telling Tony Ferguson that he is not a real Mexican. Now, Tony comes back with, of course, I'm American. He's got to stipulate because he is American. He's speaking perfect English, but he's Mexican and he's proud, he states.
And I'm brown.
Now it's good.
He says he's brown. Look at the Mexican flag back there. He wants that crowd. That crowd is out there for him, and that's sort of surprising. But there they are.
Now it's good.
I don't go tan.
Tell the people true. You're American and you're proud, but don't talk about Mexico.
It's funny how he says he doesn't go tan. I just now noticed that. He says he's brown. He's proud of it. He's using the POC, the brown.
Tony, question for you.
Hey, don't be training over here then, dog. Get the out.
Hey, don't talk about Mexico.
Sir, thank you. Thank you guys a lot. I'm going to square these guys off and get this going here.
Okay, notice, and this is hilarious because in other soccer shows we hear certain individuals, one in particular, who pronounces Mexico always. This is talking in English purely, but whenever Mexico gets pronounced, it's Mexico. And I love how Khabib pronounces that and says, don't talk about Mexico. And he pronounces it properly with a good, Mexican, proper accent. So it's hilarious, and they're just going back and forth. Let me. I want to listen to this. I want to catch this spot again.
Hey, don't talk about Mexico.
Sir, thank you. Thank you guys a lot. I'm going to square these guys off and get this going here.
Okay, so Khabib knows he might have some insight into this. He knows Mexican people. He says don't talk about Mexico. And this is sort of interesting because it all goes into the Mexican soccer aspect where, we have these guys who want to talk about Mexican soccer, want to talk about Liga MX, but don't talk about Mexico. Don't talk about Mexico. When the last time you've been to a Mexican soccer game or the last time you've been to Mexico is years ago, or you have no real clue or insight. Now, that's not totally realistic and such, but just like this press conference isn't realistic. I mean, many people can get plenty of insight from watching the game from afar from the United States. It's totally legitimate to cover Mexican soccer in the United States, even though you don't go to the game and you're not in the press box or you're not around the fans and enjoying the environment. Just like this sort of, back and forth is really, not really serious. But Khabib makes a good point. And he gets that jab in, and that's a really strong jab. And you can see Tony is sort of irate and upset about all this because there is some truth behind what Khabib is saying about Tony Ferguson not knowing about Mexico, not talking about Mexico. But he goes out and says it, man. He thrives it. He needs that fan base to be, behind him, and to have that flag and to have that uniqueness of a Mexican warrior who can take a punch. And surely Tony can take a punch. He can take a punch. He can battle, and we've seen that in his previous fights. So let's get some history, because this reminds me of something that previously happened with Tony. And in Mexican MMA, or in Spanish-speaking MMA, on previously Fox Sports Español, they would show the UFC events, and one of the callers for this UFC event was a Brazilian fighter who was named Fabricio Verdum. Now, this Brazilian fighter speaks very good Spanish. I think he lived in Spain for a long time. He speaks very good Spanish, very good, of course, Portuguese, and then pretty good English. So he's one of the announcers and one of the people that call the fights, along with some other Spanish speakers. And in Spanish, he does a pretty good job of calling the fights. So this guy's well known. And this was a long time ago. We'll go to this. I think it was 2017. Okay, they're at a media lunch, and I want to show the certain parts of this because it's interesting. It goes back to the Tony Ferguson, Mexican pride issue. Now, these two, of course, are not fighting. They're different weight classes. Fabricio Verdum is a heavyweight, and Tony is a middleweight, or a lightweight. Okay, heavy, lightweight. And you can't really tell the size difference, but there is definitely a size difference between these two. So at the beginning, it's sort of, you can see a little bit of tenseness, a little bit of adversity here going on. So let's look at this. So they say hello, they greet. He sort of ignores though, and he's looking at him. Tony's sort of like ignoring him. He's sort of on his phone, and you can see Fabricio sort of, wondering like, what's up? Like there's some type of beef here, and I don't remember the whole history. Let me lower this a little bit. I don't remember the whole history behind this. You can tell Fabricio's sort of wondering what's going on, and sensing a little bit of hostility between the two, or like Tony is ignoring him. But what I really want to get to is coming up.
Tony, what is your diet like right now? It's very contrasting with what Fabricio.
Okay, here he asks him exactly. Oh, he even mentions Fabricio. He asks him what his diet is like. Let me play this back a little bit.
What Fabricio is eating, and your juice and your fruit. I know you have a pretty tough weight cut. What are you eating like now?
There's no tough weight cut, man. I'm actually right on.
Okay, so he's comparing it. He says, I notice you're eating totally different from what Fabricio is eating right here. He's eating fruit, and Fabricio looks like he's eating, a meat and some, veggies or whatever, a plate of food, whereas Tony is not. And this is where Tony sort of gets into it, and Fabricio notices it. He's noticing everything. He's sensing some hostility here.
Point, but instead of eating bougie ass food, I'm here and I'm doing my shit. I'm a Neanderthal, man. I just came down from the mountain. Last thing I want to do is engulf myself in some bougie ass shit because I know it's gonna make me weak. I'm not here to play this.
Okay, so he insults the food that Verdum is eating right in front of him. Verdum is, he's faking getting on the phone and on the phone call and stuff like that, and he is hearing every single bit of it, and he's getting enraged. So let's continue on.
You are a little bit more.
So here you can tell Fabricio is getting more and more into it. He's putting his ear into this conversation, into this interview. He's noticing the tenseness and the hostility. And here's the part that we're going into the Pocho-esque of Tony Ferguson. And it's no blaming or anything. That's just the way things are. That's the way we are as Mexican Americans in this culture. Many people are in this same boat. So let's check it out.
Absolutely. It's a belt, bro.
What does it mean to you?
It's a belt. It's shiny. It's awesome. It's cool.
So here you can see Fabricio is smiling. He's getting ready to inject himself into this. And he does so by talking over by having a conversation at the same time and talking over, as if ignoring Tony Ferguson and his, media shine that he's getting.
It's a piece of hardware I can get for my baby boy. Absolutely. Hold on, I'm talking, brother.
So he's talking about the food. He says the food is good and that he didn't eat anything. He's talking in, I believe it's Spanish. It could be Portuguese because it's very similar some instances of the two languages. But he says I didn't eat anything, and he's sort of explaining why he's eating it. And he's okay. That's just the whole instigation of it. Tony tells him just to like, not interrupt, and he's not even facing him, and then Verdum is not having it.
What I'd like to say.
Okay, so he's yapping at him in Portuguese, and Tony's just like, trying to calm him down, trying to say what I'm trying to say, quit interrupting me, and this is where it gets intense.
Cuando yo estoy hablando, necesito cállate.
All right, what did he just say? What did Tony Ferguson just say? Cuando yo estoy hablando, necesita cállate. Necesita cállate. So obviously he knows very limited Spanish. He makes the mistake of necesita cállate. So he said the Spanish incorrectly, and then here we got Verdum. He goes into some Spanish, but he mixes in the Portuguese also. Let's detect it.
Tu puta madre, maricón. No, a mí no me digas así, cabrón. No me vengas a hablar así, que no es así que funciona, Tú vas a hablar así con tu división, conmigo no vas a hablar así, maricón.
What I wanted to say is fake.
Não, vai te fuder, vai tomar teu cu. Vai te fuder.
Okay, so Tony Ferguson spouted a little bit of Spanish, reverted to English because that's his comfort. I mean, that's all he can do. He has a little phrase in Spanish. Verdum is railing at him in Spanish, and you'll notice. I'm leaving. I'm going to edit out a lot of these words, but he uses a word, I guess a homophobic word in this instance, where he later apologized, of course, which is a very common word, I guess, in Latin community and Spanish language. So there's no surprise that he would use this word. He later apologized for it, but he's railing at him in Spanish, and he has no response. Tony has no response other than in English to defend himself.
Fuder. É isso aí, vai te fuder, não, comigo tu não vai falar assim, ó, seu merda.
I don't understand what he's saying.
Não entendo, vai tomar teu cu, é isso aí, ô palhaço. Tu é um palhaço, rapaz, tu é um cu de cachorro, rapaz. Cállate um caralho, vai tomar teu cu, palhaço. É, isso aí é um cu de cachorro, não tem esse negócio aí comigo. Comigo vai falar com a tua divisão assim, ô palhação.
What the fuck you doing?
Tu não vai falar, comigo não fala. O que é o pau no cu?
You and your punk ass.
Não, teu cu, pau no cu, vai te fuder, comigo não vai falar assim, ô palhaço.
Big guy, right?
É, big guy, é isso aí mesmo. Não, falei, Cris, não. É um cu de cachorro esse merda aí. Esse pau no cu. Comigo não vai falar assim, ó, pau no cu. Comigo não, maricão.
You can see my man, Alfred Perez, right there in the background, taking the video. He is on site. He mentioned that. Okay, so this is just another instance of, what Pocho life is all about. Like, many of us love the Mexican clout. We love to have the Mexican backing, the fan base, the Mexican flag. I'm a Chivas fan, I'm an America fan, I love Liga MX over MLS or all these things. But in reality, we're American. We're just as American as any other dude. And it comes out especially when we can't properly, put a Spanish sentence together and speak the language of a true Mexican. And that's just the way it is. I mean, Tony's Tony Ferguson. Fabricio, who's a Portuguese or a Brazilian guy, has lived in a Spanish-speaking nations, understands Spanish, can speak Spanish in a professional broadcast environment, does so. Tony does not. So this is just a good instance, and let's take it to another tangent thing. Recently, there's been some U.S. women's national team talk in the news, and our man Wiso gives this tweet, and he brings back an old tweet about. I have the comment here, Pochos. So that's really the reason behind this whole thing. So let's go back to his old tweet, and this was from last year. He asks, the English Mexico fan base, Do you root for the U.S. women's team? Give me your thoughts. Yes, only. Okay, so that could include, maybe Americans who passively watch Mexican soccer or watch the English Mexican fan base, hashtag from afar. Maybe the 38% no, only Mexico. That's where you have, loyalties to Mexico and to no other country, to no other rival, not even if they're not directly against your own club in Mexico or your own country in Mexico. So the third option, both Mexico and the United States. So we have to go to the jersey of the Mexican dude wearing a half Mexico, half United States jersey on, and all the ridicule and all the hilarity that comes along with that. It's the same as half Chivas, half America jersey. Would that even, how ridiculous would that be? So now, I, myself, on the women's side, I don't really, have too much interest in women's soccer. So, I probably would vote for both Mexico and the United States because I enjoy the U.S. women's team. Like, they are dominant, and who doesn't want to see just dominant performances and the U.S. team go and win the World Cup? Now, if they were to play Mexico, I would know already that they're going to be in Mexico. So yeah, it'll be like, okay, Mexico, if they can, pull off an underdog win or, get some type of result, and cool. But let's be realistic. Let's have the U.S. team, wash Mexico, get past this game, and get on to like the tougher competition, the England, the Brazil, the China, or whatever. Go and play these, the top tier teams and see if someone can beat the U.S. Or if not, then the U.S. just dominating. Boom, golazos and good gameplay and the dominance of the U.S. women. Let's see it. I'm all for it. So sure, I could say both. In reality, like on the men's side, only Mexico. No U.S. national team. On the MLS and club side, Liga MX, all Liga MX. No MLS at all. And it's not like, I'm not an American or anything. Sure, call me an American. I'm a proud American. I'm proud of Mexican descent as well. So there is aspects of both, and there is aspects of no. The Pocho is strong, and if you answer both, because there's sort of an aspect of, I live in the United States, so United States is my country. The United States women's national team is my country. And I'm not saying that in Mexico, Mexicans in Mexico can't be both as well, because, if you're not really, an intense fan of something, then sure, you can vote, you can root for your rival. If they're not playing your country, sure, go ahead. So this is just, an insight into Mexican American culture of, your true fan base, your true loyalties, your true, origins of who you really would root for as a Mexican American. And my response to this was, of course, Pochos. Pochos are going to root for, both in the majority. In the majority. So there's nothing really wrong with that. Nothing wrong with old Tony Ferguson getting called out. But it is a good jab. It is an effective jab. It is a real jab at a guy like Tony Ferguson and any Pocho out there who claims to be more Mexican than thou, but refuses to, if they were given the choice, live in the United States or live in Mexico, the United States is there. And why do they choose the United States? Why do you diss Mexico like that? Why do you diss Mexico? And so that's pretty much it. I have a story, but I'll tell it later. I might have already told it about living in Mexico, living in the United States, the decisions he made. But this is some good insight. Another example, Tony Ferguson, great guy, great fighter, Mexican-American. There's your Pocho. See you guys later. Have a good rest of the week, and take care.